Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Southeast Media Sunrise, dedicated to giving a voice to authors of all genres. I'm your host, Jodi Hockinson. Joining us remotely today by phone is David Essel, M.S., author of Angel on a Surfboard, a mystical romance novel that explores the keys to deep love. David Essel is a #1 best-selling author 11 times over, counselor, master life coach, international speaker and radio host whose mission is to positively affect 2 million people or more every day in every area of life, regardless of their current circumstances. He is verified through Psychology Today as one of the top counselors and life coaches in the USA, and is a verified relationship expert through Marriage.com. Welcome, David, and thank you for joining us today.
Jodi, excited to be with you, your listeners, and talking about this powerful book on love.
So I understand the Hawaiian Islands served as an inspiration for writing this book. Could you tell us how the story came about?
Yeah, it's so funny, Jodi, because, normally, we've written over 10 books now, and normally when I go to write a book, I spend a lot of time on the outline. And then once I start writing the book, it goes really fast. But I spend a lot of time on the outline. But with this book, Angel on a Surfboard, I was hired to go to Maui to speak to a large banking organization. And they paid me so well, I decided I'd never been there. I decided to spend 3 weeks, a week on Maui, a week on Kauai, and a week on Oahu. And it was an amazing 3 weeks. But the day after I gave the keynote address, I was down by the pool, and I always carry notebooks with me, pads of paper, legal pads, just to take notes, and I'll sketch out ideas of what I want to create, new programs, et cetera. And on this one day, here I am in Maui at the hotel at the pool. I started just jotting some notes down. And before I knew it, like about 4 hours had gone by, Jodi, and I had filled up an entire legal pad. And I knew I was having fun, but I really wasn't paying attention to what I was writing. And I got done with it, and I ran up to the hotel room. I called one of my best friends, Lee Witt, out of Seattle, and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to read you a portion of this. I think it's a story, an article, a book, it's something. And tell me if it's making sense to you, because to me, it's just really mystical, wild, erotic, and I don't know where I'm going with it. And so he said, sure, go ahead. He listened to me for 45 minutes, and at the end of 45 minutes, Jodi, he said, get your butt back to the pool and finish that book.
That's fantastic.
And I went, and I did. And the next day, up in the morning, grabbed my stuff, and I went down. And here's where it gets really interesting. I don't know, if it's, an energetic, a spiritual experience. There's a word that we use in the world of spirituality and personal growth, and it's called being channeled through. And what that means pretty basically is that you get out of your own way and you just write, and you allow whatever to come from the conscious, the subconscious, God, wherever it's coming from. You just get out of the way and you let it flow. Well, as I'm going down to the pool the very next day, now I know I have a book on my hands. All of a sudden, all of these synchronistic experiences started becoming profoundly in my face. Meeting a 70-year-old retired surf king who knew more about me, and I was only on the islands for 2 days than I could ever imagine, and it freaked me out. I'm sitting there, this guy is talking to me like we've been friends for 20 or 30 years, and I was freaking out. I was sitting there thinking, how does this guy know so much about me? And then as I continued, to go from one island to the next, these experiences were happening that, your listeners will read about in the book that were all about love. And it was about, how do we know we're ready for deep love? And what are the signs that would say you're not ready? Well, as I'm writing this story now turned into a book, I start being introduced to different women. And, the very first woman, and I won't spoil the entire book, but the very first woman I met was, she worked at the pool at the resort. She sold suntan lotion and all that kind of stuff. And she comes up to me, and I'm at the pool, I'm having lunch, she comes up to me, and she just starts chit-chatting. And about an hour later, I went up to go to the bathroom, and I went by to say hi to her at her stand, and there was a note there. And the note said, she had asked me my name, and I had told her, and the note said, I'm really looking forward to seeing you tonight. I have a bottle of wine and shrimp, and I want you to come over. Here's the address.
Oh, just like in your book.
Just like, I mean, like when we write novels, and this is, I think, my third novel, we will take parts of reality and we will embellish them and we'll make them into something really huge, which is what novelists do. And I've done that before, but what was really wild about this book is I didn't have to stretch very much. Things, Jodi, started happening, and, I got over to her. I will tell you this one part of the book, because it's part of Are You Ready for Love? And the one part is I went to her house, and she opens the door, and she's in heels. Basically, that's all she has on is heels. And I'm looking at her, and she's an athlete, and her body is very toned and everything. And I go, I'm saying to myself, oh, my God, I'm in so much trouble. I came over for a glass of wine and shrimp, and I didn't really think we'd be going to this level. And she grabs me by the hand and pulls me inside and says, you're the man for me. And I looked at her, and I said, what do you mean? And she said, I just kicked my boyfriend out of my house a couple days ago. And I know I'm ready for deep love, and I know you're the guy. And with that, of course, most guys, and I get teased all the time, guys are saying, and you didn't go after that? And I said, well, I was, first of all, I was kind of shocked. But after she told me that she was, single for 2 days, and she starts walking me down the hallway to her bedroom, she hands me a glass of wine. We're walking down, and she said, whatever your fantasies are, I'll make them come true. It's like, oh, my Lord, heaven on earth has just opened up. But as we sat on her bed, I looked at her and I said, you're ready for deep love? And she said, yes, and you're the guy. And I said, I don't really think this is the right time for this. And I went into, my work, which as a counselor and a life coach and a writer, I do this every day. But I said, after the ending of a relationship, we need to take the time to clean up the resentments at our former partner, the anger, the rage, the shame, the guilt. We needed to, on both sides, the things that we did to them or with them that were not appropriate, what they did to us. I said, this is no time for you to be in a relationship. And like that was one of the first major hits, Jodi, that happened on this 3-week tour of the islands that became a huge part of the book, is that when I left her house, I started thinking, this is exactly why I'm here now. I am here on earth to help consolidate the major keys to love, because 80%, and we have this statistic, I've been doing this work for 40 years now, 80% of relationships in our country are extremely unhealthy. And we can prove it really simple by saying, well, let's see, 55% of first marriages end in divorce, 62% of second marriages end in divorce, 68% of third marriages end in divorce. Right there, that's not sounding too good. And then we have the people that are staying together where there's alcoholism, drug addiction, food addiction, gambling addiction, sex addiction, where they might stay together for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and the relationships are horrendous. And so the book ended up being, the first story I gave you is the first, I guess you would say, tip that we're saying is that take time in between relationships, which so few of us do, Jodi. Most of us, because of the fear of being alone, which everyone denies and says that's not me, but it is, the fear of being alone, the fear that we're missing out on life. I had a male client that I worked with, and he just came back. I worked with him about 1.5 years ago for a year. But he said to me, David, I'm in my late 50s. I need a relationship. And I said, uh-oh, anytime we use the word need, we're in trouble. So why do you need a relationship? He said, the purpose of us being on earth is to be in love with a partner. And I said, how has that worked for you? You've had 6 failed relationships. You keep jumping from one to another. What's the longest period of time you've taken off of the world of dating? No dating sites, no dates, what's the longest period of time? And he said 3 months.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So again, I've been doing this work for so long, Jodi, that's not abnormal. That's the scary part, is that what he told me is not abnormal. People, even if they don't get into a relationship when one dies, so many people within 30 days are on dating sites, dating apps, looking for that perfect person when they haven't cleaned up their own emotional mess and they haven't looked at the patterns they've created in love that have never served them. So the first story that I just gave you from the book, was like this awakening. And the next day when I went down to the pool, of course, I wrote out this incredible story of this woman from the night before that thought I was the love of her life. And then it just took off. More synchronistic things started happening, but they were all based on what do we need to focus on to take the relationship we're in right now and make it amazingly loving, or what do we need to focus on before we get into that next love relationship? And that's the theme of the book. And as I said in the beginning, there's some erotic, sensual, mystical things that happen throughout the whole novel. It was a blast to write, and the feedback has been amazing.
So Sandy Tavish, the star of the book, finds great comfort in the Hawaiian Islands as he explores love through the eyes of an extremely mystical and somewhat hilarious retired surfer that seems to know not only everything about Sandy and his desires in life, but also is willing to share with Sandy the incredible 6 keys to deep love. What are those 6 keys?
Oh, this is so good. We look at number 1 is we need to be willing to leave or separate from a relationship that is unhealthy. And Jodi, that sounds so logical. And yet, how many times, maybe friends or listeners that are tuned in right now, have we stayed too long when we have maybe an emotionally abusive partner, a physically abusive partner? Maybe we have a partner that, continues to put us into financial debt through their spending. Maybe we have a partner that we have an incredible amount of anger with, or ongoing arguments over money or alcohol or drugs or food or something. People stay stuck. They stay in relationships much too long. We want all of our clients to be able to come to us and say, hey, I would rather work through this tough time than leave the relationship. But if it's not working, maybe taking some time apart is a way for us to get clean and clear about what's needed to do to save the relationship. So the very first step is when you experience an unhealthy relationship, get help. A counselor, a minister, a priest, a rabbi, a relationship coach, get help. And if your partner won't go on your own. And if going on your own doesn't change your partner's behavior at home, if you're changing yours, then be willing to separate. And when we teach in our counseling work that separation should be a minimal of 90 days, people living in separate places, but staying monogamous and working with a professional to see if maybe that separation will decrease some of the negativity and allow love to come back into the picture.
Interesting. So what's the second key?
All right, we go to number 2, which is releasing judgment about ourselves or others in love. And, there's a lot of people that will say, that there's no good men in the world, there's no good women in the world, and that's a reflection of you. There's plenty of great women to date and great men to date, but if you have a negative or jaded approach, that's a judgment that you've got to clean up. And then another really emotionally moving story in the book was when Sandy came across another retired surfer. Her name was Jen. She was a surf queen, and she was really jaded, very jaded against all types of men. And as Sandy went around talking a little bit, she said, well, you wouldn't be for me. I wouldn't be for you either. And he said, what do you mean? You're gorgeous. You're a former surf queen. Everyone on the island knows you and loves you. And she said, really? And he goes, yeah. And she said, judge me on a scale of 1 to 10. And, Sandy looks at her, and she was gorgeous and smart and a beautiful smile. And he gives her a 9. And then she takes a portion of her clothing off, and she has a serious handicap, a physical handicap.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, now rate me. And he scored her higher.
Aww.
And they both fell into tears. And he says to Jen, you know, your judgment that others are going to judge you, which is kind of like, you know, one of those tongue-twisting thoughts. But because you're so jaded at men that you think all men are going to judge you, and while some men maybe have not accepted your handicap in the past, you have to drop that belief system that all men will judge you for the handicap. And so the second key is really to let judgment go about ourselves and definitely watch how closely we judge others.
Interesting. And what's the third key?
The third one is love never leaves. It simply changes form. And this is crucial, Jodi. This is so important to understand. When a relationship dies and ends, it doesn't mean that love dies with it. But what it does open the door for is for you on your own as a single person to fall in love with yourself again. Many times when we're in a tumultuous relationship, we lose ourselves. We lose our identity. We stop hanging around with the people that used to bring us joy. Maybe we stop doing the activities, the hobbies that bring us joy because we're in so much stress, so much turmoil. So what we wanted the book to share with people is that when your relationship ends, that has nothing to do with love ending. Love can be picked up not just in another relationship, but it can be picked up by volunteering at a pet shelter or reading to the blind or helping children. You know, there's so many ways to express love. So just because you're not in a relationship doesn't mean love ends. It just means it can change form, and it's up to us to find that new form to express love with.
There are 3 more keys, right?
Yeah. Number 4 is love yourself. Really learn to love yourself. And, you know, this was an interesting experience to write this book from this perspective. Because at the time I wrote the book, I was still drinking. And I am completely sober, but I was still drinking. And the surfer, Eddie, the retired surfer, called me out. And he said, do you love yourself? And I said, yeah. He said, really? He goes, you shared with me that you drink every day. That's the opposite of self-love. He said, you shared with me that you're a workaholic. That's the opposite of self-love. And he went down this list, Jodi, and I'm going, oh, my God, this guy is here to teach me a lot.
Wow.
Self-love is about treating the body as a temple. Self-love is treating your mind as a temple, which means that we don't put junk in the body and we don't put junk in the mind. That's really about self-love. So for our listeners that maybe are obsessed with politics or sugar or alcohol or any type of food substance, that's the opposite of self-love. If you're really hard on your partner, that's the opposite of self-love. If you're unbelievably hard on your children, that's the opposite of self-love. And if you're really hard on yourself, that's the opposite of self-love. So one of the most important keys, especially in between relationships, is to learn how to love ourselves deeply. And then number 5, we explain in the world of dating something that I created 22 years ago, which is called the 3% rule of dating. And we go into detail in the book of explaining what that is, Jodi. But in a snap, what that means is, in the 3% rule of dating, it says you can have 97% compatibility with a partner. But if they have any 3% of your deal killers, the relationship is doomed from day one. Absolutely doomed. And what's a deal killer? So I'll give you an example. I have one of my clients, and we didn't put her in the book, but we could have easily put in where that she was looking for deep love, and she fell in love with this man, and he smoked. And she had told me in our sessions that she could never date someone who smoked. So when I worked together, we created her 3% rule, her deal breakers, and we had it all figured out. And so then I didn't hear from her. We were done with our work, and she said she found this great guy. And I said, good luck, talk to you sometime. And about a year later, we get a text saying, I need to see David like today. And I recognized the name in my office, set up the appointment. She comes in, and she goes, why the hell didn't I listen to myself and to you?
Because he smoked.
Yeah, she goes, here I dated this guy for a year, and it was nothing but hell for a year. He kept telling me that he had no interest in quitting smoking. I kept telling him that he had to quit for me to stay, but I stayed anyway. And so I said, well, if you would have followed the 3% rule, the deal breakers that you and I came up with, this wouldn't have happened. That's how important it is. But, Jodi, not many of us sit down at the end of a relationship and create a list of what does not work for us. Most of us stay focused on, well, I'm looking for a guy that's 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, and makes $200,000 a year. That's cute. That's beautiful. But what about the traits that don't work? And that's where we make the greatest mistake. We get all caught up in compatibility and appearance and money, but we don't look at some of these traits that just are going to kill the relationship. So I think that's crucial as number 5, to really pay attention to how to date effectively. And then the last one, number 6, is only get into a relationship when you are emotionally available. And what that means is that if you're not really truly centered in your career, don't get into a relationship. You're not emotionally available. Or if you're a workaholic, don't get in a relationship until you've cleaned up the addiction to working. If you struggle with alcohol, don't get into a relationship until you are emotionally grounded, free of addiction. If you are jaded against a former husband or wife, I don't care what it is. They cheated on you, they stole money from you. Don't get into a relationship until you've worked with a professional and cleared up your frustration, jaded resentments against former partners. And the very last one that I'll say that's crucial is that if you have any serious anger or resentment against your parents for what they did to you as a child, do not get into a relationship until you've worked with a professional and freed yourself from your resentments against your parents. That is crucial because we know in psychology that when you come out of a family setting, it's called core family system, when you come out of a core family where you were mistreated, neglected, maybe there was addiction, maybe there was arguing, maybe there was fighting, maybe your parents were outrageously self-centered or incredibly codependent. If you don't take care and clean up your past, you're going to bring that jadedness into your next relationship, which means you're not emotionally available. So, as we go through the novel and explain each of these 6 keys, at the end of it, people should really be sitting back and slowing down and evaluating where they are in regards to love and the changes they may need to make in order to be more available for their current partner or a new one.
That's fantastic advice. It looks like we're out of time, but listeners, if you would like to learn more and find out what happens in this story, you can visit semediapro.com or go to www.talkdavid.com. That's David Essel, MS, author of Angel on a Surfboard. Thanks again for joining us today, David.
Oh, Jodi, I had a blast, and I appreciate you giving me the time to share our tips on love.
Oh, my pleasure. And listeners, if you're interested in getting your book published, please visit us at semediapro.com and click on the book publishing link. This is Jodi Hockinson, host of Southeast Media Sunrise, Southeast Media Productions. Like us on Facebook at Southeast Media Productions or visit our website at semediapro.com.